We have been looking at the basics of the esoteric proposition that man is on a long journey out of barbarism into a state which is associated with the highest principles. The difficulty in the West, according to Jung and many others, is that we tend to intellectualize everything. Those of us who are the thinkers of the race intellectualize and harm the soul by dispossessing it of the spirit. If you are intellectualizing everything and you are not allowing for the esoteric component, then you are not understanding things in general. Let us take an example. There is the example of the male reproductive organs which produce a huge number of spermatozoa each day. Far, far more than is necessary for the maintenance of the race. And science looks upon male semen as if it is just gas, liquid, and solid. The truth is that the sperm has got an astral component and has got a mental component. And because it is so concerned with life, there is a spiritual component. Perhaps I should try and illustrate this, although my blackboard is a little bit occupied. Let's just illustrate what is meant here. What we're saying is that the sperm itself, which is a very well understood structure, has, however, got, as it were, an astral component to it. There is the emotional or astral form interpenetrating it, as there is an astral form interpenetrating man himself. And if he is interpenetrated by an astral form, which detaches itself when we fall asleep, then what lies within him or is part of him must also have an astral form. And we must complete this understanding by realizing that man has also, that the sperm also has got a mental component. Now, the moment that you have that understanding, that these structures interpenetrate the male sperm and the female ovum, and remember that the female ovum is thousands of times larger than the component of the sperm. What the size and the rarity of, or rather the monthly production of an ovum implies esoterically, I pointed out this morning, is not really known, understood, partly because information has been difficult in forthcoming. We don't understand with the clarity that we do with men what the difficulty is with women's climaxing. The male component of the phenomenon known as the nocturnal emission, or if you like, the wet dream, the male component, the male aspect of it, is very well understood too. We know that we have very sharp senses, sensory experience, and man has great acuity, sharpness. And we know that when a male sleeps, that he is sexually aroused during the whole period of night's resting. he becomes naturally sexually aroused. Sometimes this arousal can be accompanied by an inner experience, a dream, a visual experience, which is erotic, and which leads to the male's erection going on to ejaculation. We also know that because of the sharpness of the experience of ejaculation, this is terribly important to understand whether you're male or female, the sharpness, the strength, the potency, the acuity of the male experience at the moment of ejaculation is so powerful that an extraordinary thing happens, and that is that the male involuntarily goes through the astral stage and materializes or comes back into his physical body in order to achieve the climax of the nocturnal emission. In other words, males awaken in order to carry the sharpness of definition of the orgasm. In order to achieve that, they must wake up. They must come through, and then the physical senses are employed. And that completes the matter. Now, what the female counterpart of that is not known to me anyway. And although questions have been asked, we don't really understand what it is. And it's an important matter because when you study literature on the subject of climaxing, make a note about something, on the matter of climaxing, in the past, women have been expected to understand the climaxing in terms of the male description. The male experience is well known, very frequently described, and not so with the female, and the result is that the female has been, forced in the past to accept the male version as applying to her, and it's just not true. It may be that women have existentially very different experiences from each other, whereas the male's experiences almost identical from person to person. You'll say, well, what is he getting at? He's getting at an important factor about human anatomy. And human anatomy is characterized by a structure that's well known, and it is the structure of the human diaphragm. The human diaphragm is a sheet of muscle that acts as the floor of the thorax, the thoracic cage, in which there are the two lungs. Now, it is taught in esoteric parlance that the chakra at the base of the spine is there for all time, and it is there specifically acting as a root chakra, which somehow or the other, unknown, but lately more clarified for a good reason I'm going to give you, being clarified by statements suggesting that somehow or the other the center of the earth is related to the chakra at the base of the spine, and that whatever occurs in human spiritual growth, the base of the spine has got to be part of it. And so the point I'm making is that there is no way that one can, as it were, take this component of our spiritual growth away. That's not true, however, of the solar plexus chakra, the center of emotion, a six-petaled lotus. Well, you can take it for granted, that's 6 petals. This is 4, and no, that's not right. The sacral center is 6 petals, and this is 8 petals. These 3 chakras lie below the diaphragm, and the breathing mechanism, which is called diaphragmatic intercostal breathing, is related to this sheet of muscle, the diaphragm, which flattens and then relaxes, flattens and relaxes. And as it flattens, it draws air in, and that's the diaphragmatic part of breathing. According to Bailey, the diaphragmatic part of breathing is related to centers above the diaphragm, where the intercostal, the breathing with the ribs like the handle of a bucket coming up and down, is related to the centers below the diaphragm. Now, the problem with spiritual growth is this, that these centers have to be shut down, not that one, the base of the spine, but these 2 centers need to be shut down in order to open the heart center above the diaphragm, in order to open the throat center in the region of the thyroid, and then the 3 head centers, one in the space between the eyebrows, let's put it in, space between the eyebrows, the 1,000-petaled lotus, and another center which is related to the bifurcation of the carotid arteries in the neck. And this is known as alta major. And so in order to open these chakras as part of spiritual development, we have to shut down at least 1, or better, 2 of the centers below the diaphragm. Before lunch, we were talking about this matter as confronting the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church and its priests, of course, are celibate, and the matter has been raised in Rome again and again as to whether this is wise and whether it is humane for Catholic priests to remain unmarried. The reason for their being unmarried goes back a long way in the Catholic Church. It goes back to early days when immense matters were discussed in the ecumenical council of the Catholic Church. Things like reincarnation, matters like pertaining to the soul, matters like transubstantiation and communion and so on. Immense matters were discussed. And it was realized then through contact with Eastern philosophies, early Christians with Eastern philosophies, that in order to maintain the male, the priest, in a religious manner, that the best thing for him would be for him to remain celibate. The esoteric factor behind it, the yoga factor if you like, was that this sacral center would then be free to donate its energy to the throat. And we call that, of course, sublimation. The raising of energy from a lower center to a higher center is called sublimation. And the whole process of yoga is built around this concept of sublimation. We say, for instance, that the center at the base of the spine sublimates its energy to the 1,000-petaled lotus. And the 1,000-petaled lotus on the crown of the head is the receiver of energies which have originated at the chakra at the base of the spine. And that's always there. It doesn't matter who you are. The base of the spine chakra is functional, and if there is spiritual growth, the energies of sublimation will pass up to the thousand-petaled lotus. We say then that the energies of the sacral center are sublimated to the throat. And this is shown quite easily in ordinary society, civilization as we know it, that people become active. They play sport, they paint, they draw, they write poetry, they do things, and this activity draws energy from the sacral center up to the throat, and that is sublimation. Then we say, of course, that the attaching emotional energies of the solar plexus center pouring in from the astral world must be sublimated to the heart, sublimated to the heart chakra. Not selfish, attaching love, but unselfish, platonic love, where there is no attachments. So this is what we call sublimation. The difficulties arise, though, when we start to sublimate energies into the head region, because in the region of the head we have 3 extra chakras, force centers or chakras, and these 3 head centers have to receive appropriate sublimations. We say the energy of the throat center is sublimated to the outer major center, which is symbolized in my teachings by a rotating wheel with wings. A rotating wheel with wings, which suggests a chakra between the earlobes, the lobes of the ear, a chakra that is sagittal. It means that it is in the middle, and the earlobes are the tips of the 2 wings on the winged wheel, and that is called outer major chakra in Alice Bailey's teachings. But you will find the same references elsewhere. And so when we are confronted with sublimation to centers above the diaphragm, we must shut certain other chakras down that are below the diaphragm. And the Catholic priest was one of these. He was expected to practice celibacy, to cut out the sexual factor, which meant immediately that the sacral energies were raised up to the throat, and therefore he developed spiritually, and the energies of the solar plexus center were raised to the heart, and it became Mother Church that he was in love with. Or he became the bride of Christ rather than a sexual factor relating the sacral center to the area below the diaphragm. So there is, with all this, real meaning in expressing sublimation. You know, if you are an astrologer, then you can appreciate some of the symbols that are lost on people who are not astrologers. One of the symbols is, of course, the symbol of Uranus, which is that one, the planet Uranus. And the planet Uranus is the symbol of marriage partnership, where there is a continuous, firm sexual relationship. And the marriage partnership is dependent on the functional male organ, which maintains the sexual aspect of the partnership, and by friction and the production of spermatozoa, there is transfer of the male to the female, and that is the symbol of the male with arms upright and the male organ depicted symbolically. So here is the male standing, but of course that is the ordinary male, the layman. When we come to spiritual growth, of course, we talk about the higher aspect of Uranus. And that means, in terms of yoga and sublimation, it means the head and neck. The head and neck, containing the important chakras that I have just described, are the target of this activity, sexual activity. And what is suggested by yoga and some of the high states of yoga is that the equivalent of orgasm, below the diaphragm, here's the diaphragm, the body, the trunk and the diaphragm, that the equivalent of ecstasy accompanying orgasm and other factors related to it applies, but at a higher sublimated level, to the head and neck, And that is what the Golden Flower teaching is all about. It's about the creation of an ecstatic spiritual state located in the head, which is above, of course, the neck, and the neck is the symbol of the Antakarana, the higher or the head chakras, and the lower chakras connected by an Antakarana that we dealt with this morning, and the equivalent of that is what we see here. So Uranus has a very important meaning. The matter goes further. Just as there is thrown from the male organ the equivalent, as I described it this morning, the secret of the golden flower, was the downward and outward thrust of the golden flower produces children, but the higher, inner, upward counterpart made up of the sperm's higher components, astral, mental, and Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, that is the important part of the transfer here. And so what we're trying to do is to say, as above, so below, as below, so above. And the yoga states and nirvana are all meant to reflect a higher counterpart of the sexual expression of the lower half of the body. Once you can understand that, then of course the secret of the golden flower becomes more obvious. So these are some of the more esoteric factors that you won't find in books, not expressed as openly as that. But in practical everyday living, and that's what we have to deal with, my life, your life, living in the world. Always remember, I hope that if I'm ever famous for anything, it will be for this quotation. Not that we should live in this world less, but that we should learn to live in both worlds more. And the Uranus symbol, of course, shows you just that. It's two worlds. Most people of the 6 billion on Earth today live below the diaphragm. Even in Western society, consciousness is below the diaphragm. You go and meet people today, usually in a pub, you'll find them that they have nothing to talk about except birds and boodle and soccer and nothing else. And it's a terrible experience for theosophists, for esoteric people, to become alienated from a group, because they go back into society, they do their work, they earn their salaries, they go and have a drink, they talk to the guys, and they find the guys have got nothing to say to them except birds and boodle and the rest of the nonsense. And all the stuff, the higher stuff to do with the sublimation into creative and spiritual energies is lost to the average person. They're on the terraces watching soccer, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are alerted, if you have been awakened inwardly, you can't live without it. You can't live without it. And so we have to live in the world. And the monasteries and the lamaseries, the Sufis and any other religion you like to name are aware of it, that you've got to do certain things. And the raising of energies to the heart is important for the person who is spiritually developing. Your heart needs sustenance. Being suddenly promoted to be the manager of a factory means that you're in a position of responsibility for the whole factory, its welfare, its pensions, its living conditions, and so on. And suddenly your heart is called upon to deal with matters that relate to a group, perhaps 200 beings. And the heart has to adjust itself to those conditions. And if it is not getting energies from its lower centers, then it may struggle. And you may suffer from cardiac insufficiency. Your heart can't get enough oxygen through the coronary arteries that you've got. So many conditions are related to this aspect of love. And the sheet I gave you this morning points out that love is important. We say love wisely applied and wisdom lovingly applied. 2 observations in the list this morning. Get a copy from the good lady here. And we apply that immediately to what's going on around us. That's everyday life. And we say, love where you are, love who you are with, and love what you are doing. And that is the general context, or should be the context of a monastery life. That the monks love what they're doing, the way they polish the banisters in the monastery, or the way they do the gardening or planting this. They do it with great love. And they have their camaraderie, which is the communion of saints, by sitting down together at night and eating. So love who you are with, what you are doing, and where you are. The house that you're in, the monastery that you're in, the garden that you're in, and everything profits from that. All the theosophical sayings and the Gupta Vidya of India are coming into prominence today because of quantum physics. The physics of Isaac Newton, and even the physics of relativity of Albert Einstein are not out of date. They still apply to objects that our senses apprehend. But we have senses that are capable of viewing visualization. I'm working on a biography, and I have guys will tell you, I have put down some of the characters in my life, and I shall probably have more than 500 of these characters. And each of the characters I can visualize. You can just say the name, and I've got the ability to... Now, I didn't seek that out. It came to me by opening some of the head centers. And one of the processes of meditation is visualization. Visualization. And if it's the secret of the golden flower that you're seeking, then why not the daffodil? It's in season right now. And it has that lovely, can you give me some paper here? The daffodil has that lovely corolla. You know what I'm talking about. And right in the midst of the petals, there's this lovely cup. And the cup suggests that what does the Holy Grail suggest? That the cup be filled. Now, if you can visualize these structures, that's not difficult. And if you see the petals as being a lower triad with a higher triad imposed upon it, and the central point of the monad, this is what visualization is all about, the ability to take structures and by a visual picture created here, a visual picture created in the sacred square inch between the eyebrows. That's what's required. The beauty of higher manas, which is abstract thinking, the ability to think about things that have nothing to do with your survival at all. The ability to think, to ponder on problems of humanity, on problems of the heaven states, on problems of reincarnation, not yours, but humanity altogether. What is happening on the planet where the population has increased 3 times as much as when I was a boy? 6 billion instead of 2 billion. Where is the wherewithal coming from to provide this 6 billion with astral bodies, with etheric counterparts, with mental bodies, with higher triads? You know, there's nobody else on the planet that will take responsibility for these matters. Where are we heading for? What is the ultimate destiny of the earth? And it's only in the esoteric that you can get these answers. And it isn't that we seek complicated answers, we seek answers in nature. And daffodillies fill their cups with tears. Milton, who wrote a Lycidas because his closest friend was drowned at sea. And he wrote Lycidas and talked about the way that flowers react to sorrow, to grief. And daffodillies hang their heads and the cups filled with tears, corollas filled with tears. That's why I love the esoteric. And I give my whole life to the matter of symbols. You see, you and I are concerned with bringing our attention from a wide range of things. I now know what galaxies are like. I now know what happened at the Big Bang. my consciousness has been extended, just as yours can be extended, and extended geometrically if you go through an initiation, a proper initiation. And if your consciousness is that huge, you must still bring it down. Ultimately, for spiritual growth, you've got to be able to bring your consciousness down to the point. And that's the most sacred of all symbols. And if you can do that, especially when you're in the state of between waking and sleeping, it's called hypnagogia. And between sleeping and waking, when you're coming out of it in the morning, which is called hypnopompia, two very, very precious periods in our lives. Going off to sleep and coming out of sleep, because it's then that higher beings can reach you. They can take your dreams and change them and give you message. Not in the spiritualist sense, but in the sense of your higher self conveying to you very important meanings. If you have symbols, that can be done. If you must have it in concrete or black and white, then it's a difficult matter. The motor car, something we all know. Good heavens, you can't move in the streets now for motor cars. Everybody's got a motor car. But it has a higher implication to it. The motor car is ruled by Uranus. Uranus is the ruler of Libra, and Libra is shaped like that, and that's the shape of a motor car, isn't it? And for Americans, certainly, the motor car is a partner. The American woman, especially, where towns are immense distances apart, she must have a motor car. And she is only happy if she has got one. And so the motor car may indicate something important to you, to the higher being that's trying to reach you. Or maybe your personality is depicted in symbols as a house, what you dwell in. And your personality is what you dwell in. And if the higher self is trying to tell you what's wrong with your personality or what is right with your personality, it's good to be able to depict, for the higher self to depict your personality as a home, as a house. And if you are living in a house whose roof leaks all over the place, if you're living in a house where the windows are muddied and soiled and the floors are broken, then the suggestion that is coming to you in the state of hypnagogia and hypnopompia is that something must be done for your personality. Somebody came to me once and said, "Douglas, I'm having dreams every night in which the bath is overflowing and it's spilling and it's drenching the floors and coming down the stairs and the houses. What does it mean?" And the answer is very simple. The answer is that, my dear, your emotions are soiling things, because water is emotion in symbology, and there's no way out of that. Or somebody else said to me, "You know, may I talk to you about something very private?" "Yes, you may talk to me about something very private." "Well," she said, "the trouble is that when I go to the toilet, I have massive evacuations. Massive they are. And it goes on and on. What does it mean?" The answer is perfectly simple. That some people need to get rid of a lot of material clogging up their psyches. That they're stuffed full of things that produce emotional nonsense in them. Don't expect saints and cherubims to be the content of your spiritual life today. We're different. We're different, and the symbols of everyday living are the ones that count. And if you have a dream, an experience, especially the waking dream, if you have a dream that the motor car you are driving has got a wonky steering, and when you try to steer, the car goes all over the place, it's telling you that you need direction. You need to get to the point. You need to get direction in your life. And if you have a dream of the car struggling with a carburetor that's choked, then there's something suggestive here, something to do with your energy, capacity to draw energy, to obtain energy, possibly from within. I'm trying to create in your minds, as it were, the reality of everyday living, and to cut out a lot of this nonsense of expecting everything to be highfalutin, be full of angels and saints and so on. And so symbols are terribly important, and this is the symbol of being able to take your consciousness from a broad area and bring it down to a point. If you don't like that, you can go even further and you can say, well, what's wrong with the horn of the unicorn? There's my horse. There's the horn of the unicorn. And there's the same thing, except the spiral is like this. There's the spiral, except that it's projecting. And all these symbols, every one of them, this is the symbol of perfected man. And so as you tread the path of unfoldment, you begin to get help from the higher self. If, as you were taught this morning, you have a higher self like that and you have a lower self like that, and you build an antakarana, and that's a special discipline on its own, then the energies of buddhi will flow down into your personality. And the energy of the will, which can easily destroy entrenched habits, the energy of Atma can pour down into the physical brain. And the sportsmen tell you that. I was coming into the last 200 yards, struggling to break the record. And as I came towards the winning post, I could feel the lack of oxygen in my muscles and the acids accumulating. And then when I felt I couldn't go on much longer, and I was only 25 yards from the tape, I felt this energy come down into me. It poured down into me, and I was able to get to the tape and break the record. You have to live these things in your mind. This is a nasty tale against the English football team in the last World Cup, but it became known after the cup was over that the team was being taught to visualize themselves winning. And there is a true factor involved here physiologically, that if you visualize what you are intending to do, the actual action or process comes easier and more expertly if you can visualize it in advance. And they were taught to work in combinations with each other and visualize themselves getting the ball up to the goal and shooting the goal and so on. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Nearly did, but it didn't. But it is an indication of the way things are going. Now, the opposite to the moments interlude. of coming to a point. The opposite of that is like that. And the two together make an important factor with regard to the last statements I was making, and that is the center at the base of the spine is represented by a coiled snake called Kundali. Kundali, a snake, and she is coiled 2.5 times at the base of the spine in the Muladhara chakra. And she uncoils and moves up the spine, and that is one process of uncoiling at the base of the spine, and then reaches up towards the head, and then in the head there is this process of coiling up, winding up, which is concentration of meditation. And so the two are opposites, and they're yin-yang. They're yin-yang. And we must learn to be able to unite both of these. It's my experience that when you can unite them, that the Muladhara, or some center in the earth, emits an energy that passes through the soles of the feet, up the spine as it were, and meets a downpouring energy which comes when you concentrate your attention to a point. And so we are placed, as it were, between these two opposites, the yin and the yang. There's the head, the body, and the center at the base of the spine. And of course, amongst all this, there is the factor of sexuality. As I said this morning, we can lose as much as 60-70% of our total creative energy in pursuing passionate impulses, in sexual delights. Not that there's anything religiously wrong, no intention here to cause something to do with conscience. No, it's just that there is so much energy that you can carry, and in esoteric terms, for the male, it is in the life force, in the 2 or 3 million spermatozoa which are made every day. There's no way out of it. You can take your pick. But that's the truth. And the golden flower is the symbol of spiritual fertility. It's the symbol of spiritual fertility. And so we come to consider the extraordinary nature of circles. Do you know what the picture is? It's entitled Circle somewhere. Anyway, let me just talk about it. We call circles used in yoga and in psychology mandalas. Mandalas. Thank you. Why not give them out? This is weird, so you better get hold of one. Okay? The earth rotates once every 24 hours. We are aware that there is a pole star. It's called Polaris. And so I'm going to put in Polaris here as being our pole star. And the stars clustered around it. If you were on the surface of the Earth, there's the surface of the Earth, and you were standing on the surface of the Earth, the stars near to Polaris therefore rotate. In 24 hours they make circles around Polaris. Circles around you, us, we, humanity on the planet. And our Earth is rotating, and the Earth is also moving around the Sun. And the Sun relates us to cycles, to seasons, and so on. Spiritually, we're told that the Great Bear, which is symbolized here, the Great Bear or plough, has two stars which point to Polaris. When we were lost in the desert of Libya during the war, we would always look for Polaris, the stars of the Great Bear, and look for the pointers, because the pointers pointed north to Polaris, and we knew where we were. It was a great comfort to us. But according to the esoteric teachings, the stars of the Great Bear not only point north, or the two pointers do, but they represent the seven rays, the seven rays. That the seven rays, whose key we use for esoteric psychology, the psychology of the seven rays, are said to originate in the stars of the Great Bear. But also, we say that the seven stars relate to the seven head centers in man. If this is man, women as well, of course, no arguments about that. There are seven head centers in man. And these seven head centers, irrespective of where they are important centers because they are as above, so below. And these seven head centers therefore line up with the seven stars of the Great Bear. And if we put this head of man in here, with these seven head centers, there's a relationship between them. What I'm trying to do with my illustrations, and the one you've got in front of you, is to show you as above, so below. As above, so below. And it's helpful if you recognize that you are part of the galaxy. You are part of the galaxy. And in esoteric style, you are part of the galaxy and responsible for the galaxy. We may be the only advanced living beings in the galaxy. And the sooner that we recognize that we have a role as humanity, especially with its expanding population, that we are part of the galaxy, the better it'll be, and responsible for the galaxy. Who else is responsible for the earth? Is there anybody on the earth that you can think of who takes responsibility for the karma of the earth? The karma of the earth is difficult, not as difficult as the moon's was, according to Leadbeater. The moon, the young life that was incarnated in the body of the moon, had a very, very difficult karma. and was killed around the age of 16 or 17, a cosmic accident. The bombardment of the surface of the moon with showers of enormous meteors and planetary bodies and so on. And Leadbeater said that the life that existed on the moon, and I'm forecasting they will find minute organisms on the moon in the deep crevices of the moon, underneath the surface, the regia of the moon, that the life on the moon was transferred to the Earth, the major life forms, and gave the Earth evolution an impetus. If you study evolutionary biology, you will find there are question marks as to how the Earth's evolution progressed so rapidly in its final stages. Practically nothing for 3 billion years, and then suddenly massive convergence and opening up of... So now look at the sheet I gave you. Look at the sheet I gave you and see if we can make some sense out of it. The suggestion here is that, and this is from the book of the Golden Flower, that circulation and cycles and circles are important. Can you give me some paper down this end, please? Thank you. Just fling it over, that'll be enough for me. Fling it over. You live in England. You know what circles used to mean when we all believed in fairies and Deva life, the life of Devas and sylphs and fairies and gnomes and trolls. You've read Lord of the Rings, haven't you? Well, there was a time when people believed that if you wanted protection from attack, psychic attack, if you like, you created a ring around you and weave a circle round him thrice, for he has drunk the milk of paradise. I'm sure you must have pondered over that many times. The milk of paradise? Well, you'll have to answer that one yourselves. I'm not going to do that. Weave a circle round him thrice, for he has drunk the milk of paradise. Circles, very important indeed. They used to place stones in circles, and that would give the circle an area of magic in which people could be cured of their conditions and so on. And look in the lower right-hand corner, the annular rings of the tree, reflecting almost exactly the sun. What I'm thinking about as I look at this is mitosis. Mitosis. If you read my book, The Jewel and the Lotus, you'll see a region there on planetary mitosis. What do you think the future of our solar system is going to be? It looks very much as if it's going to be depicted a little by this picture that I've passed on to you. The suggestion may well be that humanity will become capable of reaching the other planets in our solar system. And by reaching the other planets in our solar system, it might signal that we, circulating the star called the sun, are ready to divide, that our solar system has reached a degree of consciousness in which human intelligence is on each of the planets, and it's time for us to divide, the solar system's energies to divide, the solar cell, if you like, to divide, and for humanity to embrace the first of its neighboring stars. The first of its neighboring stars. Never say that it's impossible. things that we used to think were impossible have occurred in our lifetimes and keep on increasing in the scope of their extensiveness. Let me give you an example of how you can grow from studying symbols. You've seen me use the symbol of the scroll, but of course you would find that at the head of columns of a Roman temple. The columns of a Roman temple. But if it was a temple, you would expect the temple to give the symbology of spiritual growth. And it's here. You approach the temple. You approach the temple. There it is. One. Columns. Temples, columns. Isn't that the temple? Yes, you approach the temple for spiritual enlightenment and growth. And here it is. Your eyes go up, the fluted columns, aspiration goes up and up and up and up and up. And you reach a high point, and then you begin to gather your consciousness and concentrate it into a point. And these are found at the top of the columns. It's the symbology of spiritual growth in the columns of a temple in ancient Greece or Rome. I think it's lovely.